I'd like to call the June 28th meeting of the Hazlet Board of Education to order. If you'd please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Secretary, do we have any correspondence?
By chance we do, Mr. President.
Awesome.
It is a thank you note from Deb Mercer for the beautiful clock that she received.
And that is the end of the correspondence?
It is at this moment.
All right. Any comments from the public? All right. Our first order of business is the superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Fowler. I just have one item this evening, and that is to thank Susie Ferrillo, Susie Maloney, and John and Carol Wollenberg for all of their hard work with our foundation golf outing. A week ago last Friday, it was very, very successful, and thank you to board members that were able to participate as well. It was, I think, it was hot, but it was also probably the best turnout that we've had in a number of years. And we haven't got the final numbers in as of yet, but it was a very, very successful event in spite of the heat. And I know everybody had a good time. So that concludes my report.
Who won that anyway? Does anybody remember?
I think it was my team.
I think it was too, yeah.
Who was on your team?
Well, we had some ringers.
Yeah.
Bob Regan, former superintendent of schools, and he led the team. Steve Cook obviously helped out a great deal, and so did Dave Martell. And
With an eagle almost by himself, as I
and
understand.
frankly, I stopped swinging the club after about the 12th hole. I was kind of non-existent. But
I think the board should be concerned that maybe our staff is spending a little too much time out of the office. And
But
I don't know, our financials would belie that.
it was a lot of fun. It was truly a lot of fun. So that concludes it.
all right, we have one discussion item this evening, and I'm going to ask Judy Tigrini and Gail Hicks to present on response to intervention.
Well, how is everyone tonight?
Awesome.
Good. Well, we're glad to be here. Diane Limbert wanted to be here also, and she had some family things that she needed to take care of tonight, but wanted to let you know that she's full behind this presentation too. So just pretend like she's here. She's right here. Yes, we're the Three Musketeers. So we're here tonight to talk to you about our core language arts program. And one of the things that has happened over the last couple of years is that we've been doing a lot of studying about what does good reading look like, what does good writing and spelling really look like for the elementary child. And then this year, we have been so lucky to participate in a program called My Blissy. And through the My Blissy training, we have found out a few things about some changes that we ought to make in our curriculum. And it's all research-based. And Gail's going to give you a little bit of the history behind that, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about what what we're going to be asking for.
This kind of goes back, and you've been hearing from us, not just this year, but several years back about the different things we've been doing and changing as we've been going through when it talks about student achievement. And that's what this is really all about, and we want to do the very best we can to help students be successful. And so we go back a couple of years ago when we really started to look at how are our students doing, and we started to look at data. And that's where this all really started for us. And My Blissy this last year has really taken us to the next level. It's really had us look at our data and really analyze it and say, now what is this telling us about what we're doing for students, and how are we helping to make a difference to help them be more successful? And then taking the research that's out there and kind of melding those two things together to kind of figure out what can we do better here at Hazlet to help that. For the most part, probably 80% of our kids are very successful when it comes to reading. But then there's that other 20% that struggle sometimes in different areas. We need to figure out what to do for those kids. And what we found out through research and through my Blissey and through the different things that we've been sending our teachers to and our administrators to, through our RTI program, which is Response to Intervention, is that we need to really key in on those specific areas for those specific kids. And what we found out in some places is we don't have all the tools necessary for every kid in every area. We have them in a lot of areas, but we really need to get the full picture. And what we've been hearing over and over again is that's what a core language arts program is all about. So with that, we started looking at those. We started looking at what's out there. And through our My Blissey program, we took lots of surveys. We did surveys with our staff, we did surveys with our teams, and we started looking at what we needed. What was a core reading program? What did it entail? And what parts did we already have? Were we already using? Were we being successful with? And what are the pieces that we really needed to look into to fill kind of our gaps? Because we do have some really good things in place already, but there were some holes, some places that the data was telling us that we needed to fill. And so that's kind of where we are now, is to try and figure out where that is. And with that information, we started to do that. And we started back probably 3 or 4 months ago, trying to fill that hole and look at programs to help us with that.
One of the things that we found out was we have excellent teachers of reading, but we have a lack of consistency in what we are teaching our kids in reading, because our focus has been, you have this beautiful room with lots and lots of books. We were very lucky 10 years ago to get a literacy grant. And with that grant money, we sent all of our K-5 teachers to the intermediate for training in a specific literacy. It was called LIFT, literacy training. And it taught teachers how to use a workshop style of instruction and meet kids at their various needs for reading. The real focus of that program was comprehension, because that was an area where we thought we were doing, at the time, that was where we thought we were doing poorly, and we were. And we've seen our comprehension and accuracy in reading just go very, very high, which is evident on our MEAD tests. But still, there's that 20% that for whatever reason, the things that we had in place weren't quite working. And so in that program, teachers had choice on what books they might use in their classroom. So I might be in one second grade and read this book, but in this other second grade, I wouldn't read that. And so what we did do as a district was we put together and we said, okay, every second grade child has to read Mouse and the Motorcycle, so that there were some common materials, but teachers still had some choice. But in doing that, one of the things that we've discovered is we've left out a little bit of consistency of instruction for all kids. And so what we have found in our study this year of the different core reading programs is that the style of instruction is that all kids in your classroom would be introduced to the same story and materials, and then go through phonemic awareness, phonics, comprehension skills, fluency skills, and decoding skills. And then from there, you would branch them off into their area of instruction that they need. Along with that, we've discovered first grade has had it right all the time. They've been doing 90 minutes of reading forever, but really we should be doing that K-5. And so Gail and I and Diane have worked very hard with the support of the district to create a schedule where every single K-5 classroom will have 90 minutes of reading instruction next year. And in doing that, we still have enough time for math and social studies and science and all those different pieces, but we think that that is going to be really helpful. In doing that, we need to give our teachers the tools. And so we've looked at, with the help of the ISD, they've brought in a couple different companies. And so we had teams of teachers go for a day, and they had presentations from 3 different book companies. And then we, last week, had another book company come here and share their program with us. And in doing that, we've had a lot of conversations with our colleagues within the county. And the one program that really has come to the top is Scott's Forsman. And they have really worked with us. I will tell you that 2 months ago when I was working with them and they gave us our first bid, I said, I'm really sorry, but have you looked at the economy lately? Because we don't have that kind of money. And the last bid that came in, was reasonable. We are still kind of working on it to tweak a little bit, but one of the things that we've really tried to do is go back and find out, okay, where are the pockets where maybe we could pull some money district-wide? And Gail and Diane and I have each looked at our own building budgets, and we feel that we have funds in there that we can pull out and put as part of this. We've talked with Sharon, and she has district textbook account funds. And then the ISD, we're attending a meeting on Wednesday because they may also be helping us with some funds to get this program called Reading Street. And right now, we're looking at K2. If we can get the price down even more, we would love to do 3, 4, and 5. But right now, our energy is really for K2 because early intervention is the place that we want to be. One of the things that the Scott Sportsman Company also has with it is an actual intervention kit that comes along, and it is consistent with what's being taught in the classroom, so that when the students are out for their Title I time or additional intervention in the classroom, the materials are right there, and the teachers don't have to go running around to try to find them and those kinds of things. So at this point, right now, we're pretty sure that we already have it within the budget that we've looked at, enough to afford to purchase for K1 and 2. And that's about $57,000 is what it would cost us. But if you think about that, if we were to do, I worked it out, if we were to do K5, and it would be $90 a student. So when you think $90 a student, that's not that much. But it would, it's well worth it, and it would really bring consistency of instruction for all our teachers. And you know, last year we moved a lot of teachers around, and that was a little difficult for them because we didn't have a specific program to give them. And so as we do that, this will help develop that consistency in the area of language arts.
Judy, what's the incremental cost to expand the program, all in?
All in would be about $100,000.
That's excluding the 57 that's already been.
No, that would be.
That's inclusive.
That would be inclusive.
So $43,000.
About another 43, yeah.
And it goes through both buildings.
All three.
And workshops.
Yeah.
Yes, all three.
Yeah.
K5, that would be K5.
Mhm.
And everybody would be on board if it was expanded 3, 4, 5 to pick it up?
Yes, they've been involved also.
Our meeting with the ISD on Wednesday, there are 4 districts in the ISD. Talk about collaboration. There are 4 districts who agree that this is the program they could buy into. And so we're using that as leverage to get the book company to reduce the cost more, hopefully. The ISD is also pursuing or thinking about helping to sponsor districts to purchase the program, much like they did with Pearson, where they contributed 50% the first year, 25% the second year, and then we were on our own third year. So they're also talking about structuring it. So we think it will be a shared purchase, ISD, building supply, and district textbook.
Which
So,
would further reduce this $43,000 number, Shannon?
well, we're hoping.
That's what
We're hoping to get that number reduced maybe by another 10%, maybe 20%.
When do we have to commit
Well,
to the program?
we're hoping that we could get you to approve an action item in July, and hopefully by the end of this week, we'll have more specificity when it comes to the actual amount. What we're telling you tonight is we have the money to fund K2.
Is there an opportunity to bring in additional districts? I mean, are you advocating to?
Right now, no.
No.
Right now, we have Leslie, Williamston, Okemos, and Hazlet. East Lansing believes they can join us, but not for another year because they don't have the funds this year.
I have a question for our CFO. When does the school year budget close out? For 2009-10? Or this one we're in right now?
Probably sometime end of July, first part of August, when we've got a final numbers from the auditors and we're able to close our books completely, will be first part of August.
Do you think you're going to have good enough numbers to possibly make a decision for the board to consider expanding this program with additional funding from any?
Not by the middle, not by the next board possibly about the 14th of August. So we could go forward with the first piece and look at potentially what we would expand at the next meeting, or the first meeting in August, but I don't think that we'll have our numbers before then, the full numbers.
And then if that were to occur theoretically,
Mhm.
if all the planets line up, if you will, would an August decision still be able to allow us to
Absolutely.
incrementally expand that program for this calendar year?
Yes, absolutely.
What's involved with training for
Mm-hmm.
the teachers?
You know, I was thinking that too, Chris. It's wonderful. The company, there's no charge. Well, I mean, there's huge charge because you're spending a lot of money with the company, but they do provide an initial
It's
training
free.
for the kids, for the teachers, to introduce the program to them. And then they will come back, I think they said 2 or 3 times at different times throughout the year as teachers are getting into it to answer questions or kind of when we ask them. I mean, it's pretty much we set it up with them. And one of the things that we did back when we did the Everyday Math program was we had extensive training at the beginning of the year, kind of in October, again in January, all throughout the year. And I think that's why Everyday Math was so successful for us and for the teachers. So they are willing to do the same kind of training schedule for us.
And these trainers are actual teachers who've taught out of this series. So it's
Yeah.
not salespeople, it's actual people who've used it, which is real appealing to us as well.
So what exactly is it that you're purchasing? I mean, you mentioned, for example, Mouse and the Motorcycle.
Mhm.
So the books that they're offered read in the classes aren't books that are books we already have.
They're not, unfortunately, what this is, it's a, if you think back to your old Basel reader that you had when you went to school, it's a little different than that. But it starts out with that kind of a system. And so that story in there is based on the average reader at 2nd grade. So that is kind of a whole group instruction, and it might be on a topic of planets. And so that's the introduction lesson. And in there, students learn vocabulary. They learn those definitions. There's some writing that goes along with it. But now we move away from there, and the small group work becomes with additional books on the planets, but it uses the same vocabulary. But if I'm a little bit slower reader and I can't handle, huge, big paragraphs and a lot of text on the page, I have a book that I can handle and still get the information at the level at which I'm reading. It has they have average books that come along with it, and then they have, for that advanced reader who's really ready to soar, they have materials that go along with that. And then along with it, they have actual little station activities for the kids to do at those 3 different levels. We call it Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, and so they have the activities already set up that coincide with the instruction that was happening in the basic reader.
So it's already differentiated for you, set up for you to help the teacher, guide the teachers through that.
So really, the change for us, I think, is that instead of the teachers searching for the materials to meet the needs of all the different learners in their classroom, their time will be spent with this material and how can I make it better? Because that's the one thing, we have a base that they'll start with, and now they can really delve in and put their energy into the child. This isn't working for us, so now what else do I need to get?
But it doesn't change if, there's a kindergarten teacher who wants to read Junie B. Jones
Oh,
every
no.
day. They're still.
The one nice thing about this program is there's 36 weeks in the school year. It only provides for 30 because they also want to give teachers that opportunity. If we have those favorite novels, Charlotte Webb, 3rd grade, everybody needs to do Charlotte's Web in 3rd grade. Well, if it's not part of the core program, and it could be, but I'm not sure, I haven't looked at it. If it's not, that may be something as a district that we say, okay, during that 6-week period, we want to spend time on Charlotte's Web or Junie B. Jones.
So there is some flexibility.
And you will still see children around the room with their book boxes because all the books that we have, those are going to help enhance what this material, but this is the starting point. So everybody's starting at the same place.
And not only do they have the regular books that you used to see in the book basket, but they also include things like magazines and newspapers. So it's a bigger picture than just a book or just an anthology. So there is even a unit that deals with reading magazines. So there are different projects that you can take off from those different things.
The other really nice thing about this program is every teaching unit is introduced with a program that they have on the smart board. And so, of course, they've delved into that technology very well, and that's very exciting. And they also have, they are part of Pearson, actually, and so they have assessments for each unit, if you wanted to do that, or for at the end of 6 weeks, however you wanted to do it. But with our Pearson information, we could also put those into Pearson and then be able to have that data to go along with our other data that we're using.
We've also integrated science and social studies into this as well, so you're, kind of getting bang for your buck there.
Oh, and one other thing, the it's based on the new national core standards, and, we're gonna be moving that way, and, how do our GLICs fit into all that? So it's already here, and so that will really help us.
So once a system is implemented, then it's an ongoing system that can be used every single year for all the kids that come through the school system with periodic, probably adjustments or upgrades or additional
Absolutely.
components that
Yep.
can be added to it.
Absolutely.
So your biggest cost is this one-time upfront cost.
Yes, yeah.
Actually, you do raise an interesting, knowing how much movement we've had of classroom teachers. Is there a way to go back after some significant change of personnel and retrain, or maybe some insignificant change of personnel and retrain? Is that
Yeah,
part of the program?
Doing that, one of the things we've done with Everyday Math, because now we have experts on our own staff, whenever we've hired new teachers, and even with the teachers that we moved this past summer from the middle school, we did a little mini training session this summer, and we had our expert teachers like Lisa Garcia and Sandy Moore sit down with those teachers, and they were kind of their mentors. So that's what we've tried to, within the district, create our own leadership trainers with our different materials. And whenever anybody new is entering, we spend time in the summer getting them up to speed. And then they also know that's a person they can contact during the school year.
And Everyday Math did provide us with that also. After we finished that first couple of years, we could they would have trainings every year, and we could send our people to those trainings for new buildings that went on board with them. So that was part of our piece too. So they usually include that.
Don, did you have it?
Well, I think you've answered the question I had, actually. When we were starting out, I was a little unclear on what we were targeting with this, because we were talking a lot about the 20% that were struggling, which we obviously have to work with. But it sounds like you've got the 20% that's struggling, the of course, larger group, that's the target curriculum, and then the other end with the high achievers. And it sounds like really you see this as enhancing, differentiate instruction for all the students.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a real selling point.
It's a
Yeah.
real challenge for
It
an
is, yeah.
elementary teacher. They have 12 or 14 preps as it is, and then when you have 3 or 4 different reading levels, it's easy to just sort of teach the middle. And this allows with some structure for all kids in the classroom, and so it helps them do that without running around to book group and pulling this and that. And it's a huge job when you don't have kind of the structure to build upon.
That's great.
So it really does provide that, and really, the last couple of years where we've had to move teachers who aren't typically elementary teachers into elementary classrooms, teaching reading became a huge challenge.
And this would give them the curriculum.
Gives
to
them a
be
base.
able- Would give them that base to be able to start from and then expand.
I remember one of our teachers last fall said, and so what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to teach with you? And Diane Lindgren said, well, I'll be in your classroom along with the literacy leader for the first 6 weeks, and I think they spent the whole year there. I mean, no fault of the teacher, just there was no training
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
Well, this is probably not a question for these guys, maybe for you. You've also talked about the realization at the middle school there needs to be more reading taught. Does this move into anything that might ultimately be used at the middle school too, or?
Well, it can be, we're not planning that right now. We think, our ultimate goal is
Is
to
that you
have
need-
95% of
right.
our kids leaving Bookshare reading. Really, that's what Diane Newman has been trying to put in place, is those strategy classes and targeting the kids who are not reading.
So you believe with this, you would have fewer and fewer,
Well, we're hoping. You
but-
still have, if all the kids moved into middle school started in Hazlet kindergarten, you still had children come in and moving in,
Sure.
and those generally are students who have challenges for us because they haven't been in our system.
But as we're able to target their needs, we're able then to teach better to those needs. And that's the big picture that we're looking
I
at.
think the last time we purchased a program like this was in the early 80s. And then in the early 90s or mid to late 90s, we had a couple of large grants and we furnished these bookworms. But the district hasn't really purchased the programs, the literacy, probably 15, 16 years. So,
If this program harnesses the potential to arm our children from a district-wide basis with better reading fundamentals at all ends of the spectrum, this sounds like a very, very good opportunity to look seriously at financing it for the entire K through 5 spectrum. And I know we're going to look at that
we are.
with the numbers, but I think the board, we should strongly consider through our various finance and facilities and our other committee members, policy and personnel, and really put some discussion time into this.
We'll have more data, more facts.
It's exciting. This is a place to inject a relatively small amount of our $4 million budget to get great leverage for the whole reason we're here is to educate the kids.
You know, quite frankly, we didn't even believe we could be in a position to make this presentation, given the
Financial
way budget
situation.
was a couple months ago. And things got just a teeny bit brighter. I don't want to say they're really bright yet, but.
Yeah, don't say good.
But a teeny bit brighter, and then with the ISD talking about, maybe we could do a little consolidation here, get
Because
together.
they're looking brighter too.
Yes, and we can maybe help you, and if we get 3 or 4 districts, we can leverage with the publisher. And so those are the things that have just really come to light in the last couple of weeks. And it was, oh my gosh, we might need to spend $50,000. We can't do that without board approval. And so that brings us here, but it's still all under the umbrella of our town.
Right.
Which is what we've been working on, and we've had goals in that area for this past year.
And with
know,
all the
should-
money,
Go ahead.
but with all the money that we spend and those challenges that we have and those increasing costs every year, and sometimes those increasing costs that are way beyond our control and that we can never do anything about, and we really would like to. This, to me, is a great return on investment, and that's what we're here for, is for these kids and to give them every possible tool. And so I think that we ought to be a little creative and figure out a way to make sure that it happens. And I go K-5.
Yeah.
Me too.
You know-
And Steve does such an excellent job with figuring it out.
He can figure it out, yeah.
We will
Let
send
Steve do
him
it.
to go tweak numbers.
You know, I
so
told
he can
Steve
come
this
up
morning
with-
as we were walking up, he said, Sharon, I didn't tell you you needed this 120. I said, well, I bought the dress, but I can't go to the prom without the jewelry.
That's right.
And,
We need
and
shoes and a purse too.
Absolutely.
quite honestly, we sit here and we are out on the periphery with certain things. Performing arts, athletics, transportation, all these other things that have an indirect, and in some cases direct effect on the education of our children. But when Martell came in here a couple weeks ago, you didn't think I paid attention, but David talks about more innovative ways and finding ways to leverage your educational dollars for, and you're right in my world with the return on investment, Kristen.
Yep, Tim speak, I call that.
You know, the reality is this is, again, such a wonderful opportunity to leverage the funds for having a direct impact on the classrooms, that we don't have that many opportunities roll around that, in my opinion, are so clear-cut with tremendous upside, with very little downside to it. So that's exciting. I'm glad we had a chance to hear this evening.
Well, and what I really like about you, you're reaching all kids. You're challenging kids that want to improve, you know, they're already at a high level. You've got kids that need to be brought up to certain levels, and then you've got those that are in your median range that can improve. So, you know, how many programs do we get where you've got it all in one package? that you
Exactly,
can
and that's, you know,
improve?
that's really why this one came to the top, I think.
Sure.
So it sounds like we're, next board meeting on the 12th of July, we'll have a K3 proposal that you're, K2, sorry, fully ready to make.
K3's good, though.
K3's good. If you wanna put
I'm
We're
trying-
working on that.
And I mean, I think, it sounds like there's a lot of support for where Tobias is going with this. Let's take a look at what it would take to get us the rest of the way there, and I think tee that one up as a separate but important issue.
We may be able to do a presentation to finance and facilities.
You know, this obviously has the context of a budget, and I guess I don't want to just, you know, think that's a great idea and let's go do it regardless of the budget. We got to
Right,
figure
have
out.
to look at that.
Yeah.
No two ways
Yeah,
about it.
so,
But if you need help negotiating a better level, Sharon,
I'll call you.
that's in my world
I
too.
got your cell phone, I got your number right here.
And I would like to encourage us to look at it in our committee, in the Finance and Facilities Committee. I say mine, our committee, I don't know who will be on that committee after our next organizational meeting, but whoever it is, I think we should be moving towards looking at that and keeping it going forward, especially so we don't lose any opportunities for advancement on it.
Well, and whatever you guys do find out about from the ISD and how that changes things this
Yeah.
week, it'd be good to know.
could change the,
Right, because that's,
formula,
again, I
yeah.
love hearing about that kind of sort of collaboration between
Mhm.
districts that.
all right, any more questions?
This is great.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
very much. We
Judy,
appreciate
Gail,
your
thank you.
support.
And tell Diane thanks too.
She did a great job.
Excellent presentation, Diane. We'll move on to board reports. Finance and Facilities Committee.
We have not met since the last board meeting.
All right, and Policy and Personnel Committee.
We have not met either. Thank you.
Excellent reports.
Thank you so much.
Items from board members.
I have a couple. Mike and I attended the first ISD Consolidation Committee, and it was pretty much just kind of organizing things, and I think that, actually, I haven't talked to Mike, but I think we both left feeling positive about how it went, and I think it's been kind of set on a direction of not just consolidation, but that there's a whole level of collaboration, whether it's with a couple of districts, as we were just talking about, or two or whatever, that we'll look at. And the plan is we sort of brainstormed a list of, from A to Z, of things that were potentially worth talking about, with the goal to meet in August and narrow in on a couple of areas that might have the most likely success of leading to some positive thing for all of us. And the way that we'll get to that list is by getting some data on what other ISDs are doing that have been successful, as well as a comprehensive list of what's going on within our own ISD that's been successful. And we'll move from there and, come tell you what we hear and perhaps have things to bounce around. But the goal is to have a couple of areas that in the fall we can start having people look at in very specific ways, so that in an ideal world, there may be some things by the end of the year for districts to look at more concretely.
And Chris was elected co-chair along with the board president from
Mason.
Mason. So
Good job.
So, we'll see.
Will you try to keep the heat on this issue? I mean, my concern is that people are going to breathe a little sigh of relief that we may not have any cuts in our budget and walk away from the table, which I think would be a mistake, because surely we're coming back to the same conversation.
Right. Well, we talked about, I think the focus was, there was some concern, I think, is that we all shared about the focus simply being, we gotta do something like this before the state makes us do something. And that's still, out there as a potential concern. But more or less, the feeling was, we all have experiences that tell us we can do our jobs better when we're doing it in some way in partnership with others. And that there are probably other areas where,
Good.
in which we're all gonna benefit. I mean, we talked about instructional things and stuff as well, that I'm sure what you're doing here would come up in our next meeting as an example. But the goal again is to have something to look at by the end of the year, to allow districts to, consider an act on, but yet not just rushing to check off the box. Okay, the ISD is taking this over and we've solved this problem, but what lets us all do a better job at what we're trying to do?
Chris, are they planning on meeting monthly? So they're
Um,
staying on top of this?
Well, no, I don't think so. We're gonna, August is the next meeting in large part because of the summer, but the goal would be by, to have data shared by August to help us have a discussion in August that narrows down to a couple of areas on which to focus. And again, whatever, I edited a document, I haven't seen it in final yet, but I'll share whatever, comes in.
I
and
suspect
we'll-
there'll be quarterly meetings.
But with things happening in the,
Right.
Were they leaning towards any specifics right now in terms of areas that really, they seem to be the most natural and easy for people to embrace in terms of kind of a right fit, common ground type of approach? Or is it all over the place?
No, and I can
No,
answer
yeah,
a
go
little
ahead,
bit,
go
but
ahead.
I know that Don attended that meeting as well as Chris, initially, and Sharon, and Bev. And I know there was a lot of discussion, about custodial, maintenance, as well as transportation. And those were the two ticket items that evening, I think, that were probably touched on more than anything else. But as Chris said, I think everything is gonna be looked at. They're not just specifically targeting.
I didn't get the sense that the
taking a
whole,
broad,
the
like-
whole group, maybe at one point, the idea was, okay, we're all gonna come together and agree on how are we gonna cooperate on custodial and transportation. But that wasn't what the group felt.
Right.
The group felt that, there may or may not be ways to be better, and again, that we talked about it not just being, a consolidation thing, but maybe learning from Mason about something that they're doing that the rest of us could be doing and be saving money at the same time, or, whether it's outside of our ISD, other things that.
And I think we all recognize that it isn't just, it's not gonna just work by saying we're going to do this. Every district is different in terms of the services that they are providing right now. And for us to jump on board with something that doesn't work for Hazlet isn't necessarily the best thing to do just because it saves a few dollars.
And
So-
that was expressed not just by us, but by several other districts too, like, you guys over there may think that that's sufficient, but, we won't here, and we've gotta have a way to evaluate that as well, too, so, I don't know, we could get mirrored in all that and go nowhere also, I think.
Well, good luck to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Chris,
congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
I really was trying to get them information to do it all, and.
I'm curious if there's any resolution on how this committee interacts and tries to move forward compared to the administrative professionals seeking out solutions and the role of this committee compared to the superintendents identifying what their
Well,
needs
we-
are.
Yes, and we talked about that we weren't in a position to say, oh yeah, that works, but that we would, once we were to come up with a few things that were worth talking about, they basically would be turned over to administrative persons, whether it's asking districts for data, people within the ISD, to look at and evaluate and say, again, I can't tell you that's a good transportation system or not, but to turn it over there and have, I think again, as Mike said before, that the idea behind this was really just to sort of make sure that awareness of these kind of discussions was at the board level, and that to potentially make some changes or some collaboration efforts would need board action. And so rather than putting a superintendent on the spot of having to be the only one aware of it or understanding it, this was just a way to get the board's input. Yeah, we're not in a position to do that.
This is like regionalism for public education.
Mhm.
Remember, we said that here first, you guys.
The A+ district.
Other items from board members? You said you had a couple.
Oh, the only other thing, my husband sent me this email today. I was hoping maybe one of you guys could explain about the judge's decision about the retirement.
I just read that before I came
didn't
into the board,
understand. Yeah, I didn't
Judge
quite get it.
Giddings.
Yeah.
I don't don't know if anybody else read that, but he has determined that, and I'm not quite sure how the whole thing read, but there's a hold on the 3%, but there really isn't a hold on the 3%.
It sounded
so-
like it was a hold on spending it, not a hold on
I think that's it.
collecting.
I think that's it. It's to hold it in a fund, but not to be able to spend the fund, including putting it into the retirement system.
Until he decides what is
What did
the
he do,
suit
just do
that's-
something unilaterally?
Was it a suit from MEA that's led to this?
I think so,
Is that what this is?
yes.
Gee, there's a surprise.
But you think it was more in controlling how the money is spent as opposed to the collection of the 3%?
That was
I can't
how
tell you,
read
I
it,
don't
but
understand.
I wasn't clear,
It
that's
was
why I
just a
asked.
little weird.
Yeah, I read it too, and I'm having the same reaction.
All
Yeah.
right, well, we'll find out.
Yeah.
I'm sure it will benefit the
I'll
district.
probably raise it.
That was it.
I was just going to comment that I think it was at our last Finance and Facilities Committee meeting, the issue of the timing of our elections was brought up again. And just wanted to mention it for after we reconstitute the board next time, that I think several of the board members still feel that we really need to take a look at whether our election timing for board members is best and serves their district best, or whether we should look at trying to change it for cost savings. I think we all know that there are substantial substantial in the sense of in proportion to the cost of the elections, there are savings that can be had if we change it. It's less obvious that there are inherent problems with that in terms of when board members would start their term in office, of coming in during the course of the school year rather than being on board at the beginning. There are problems in terms of changing the length of your term in office, and if you're having elections every other year with the general election, the fact that you could have a majority elected all at one time. So there are definite negatives. And I know I've been approached by members of the public that don't really realize that there are negatives involved with it as well as the savings. But, you know, it's been a while now since we've looked at it. The tendency may be, again, to breathe a sigh of relief that the cuts aren't going to be as deep next year as possible. But I just wanted to bring it up and remind everyone that there are several board members, and I know there are members of the public out there that want us to take a fresh look at it. And maybe we change, maybe we don't. But just wanted to keep it in front of us.
Talk about it.
One of the things I think would be interesting is we ought to get a little pulse from those folks who have changed and ask them, how's that working? Do you feel that there's,
Talked to a few.
is there a difference? Is it beneficial? You know,
I
maybe.
know, I've heard that there's an appreciation for the cost savings, and that's been something that they've welcomed. I've also heard from districts that, you know, how lost someone feels in January. And I know of a district that's got 5 people on the ballot this November, and is kind of reeling from, and that was also involved a resignation that wasn't planned, et cetera. But still, they're really troubled by how are they going to bring in 5 members in January of this coming year and manage their district well.
Well, can you imagine the unrecognized opportunity cost of that? So if the election costs, what, about $9,000?
That's it, yeah.
And then you have 5 people that are not familiar with the school budget, that could make inefficient decisions, that essentially cost the district, say, some incremental amount greater than $9,000, just to put a number on it. That's a very interesting perspective not many people understand.
But it still would be, I mean, there are probably other information to be had. That was a casual asking of some people I knew.
Well, I think it's a great idea to do a little
We should discuss it.
intelligence gathering as we have that conversation. You know, I think it's important for people to understand. We had a fairly vigorous debate about it the first time. It wasn't something we did without pretty good consideration.
Well, and
Thank you for raising it, Don. I mean, I think it's,
And I think at this point too, some time has passed. We've got some history
Right.
from what other districts have done, and we'll be able to look at timing of elections and, you know, do we stagger terms? Do we do it every couple of years? You know, there's a lot of different options now we can look at.
Okay. Other items from the board? I want to raise, just sort of for general discussion, I think maybe get a sense, there is one, maybe a second, and possibly even a third request to name a facility after someone. And I guess I want to just get a general sense, if we can, of how we feel about that. And you know, I think it is precedential when you do it, which may cause other requests to come. And you know, I think the Policy and Personnel Committee is going to take at least one of these directly under consideration. So generally, how do we feel about this issue, to give maybe a little guidance to the Policy and Personnel Committee?
What has been our precedent up to this point in terms of how we did that? And, I mean, obviously, Vera Rallia Elementary School, I wasn't here when that was.
You weren't here then?
So,
Northern Murphy building.
no, Howard Murphy. So I'm not sure how, you know, what's been kind of our practice in terms of doing that? And
Our policy's pretty, if I recall, I remember looking at it when we had the library discussion, because it would be an issue with respect to approving the name of a library and at Meridian High School. And it's kind of, if I recall correctly, it's like, if we approve the name, we approve the name. You know, it didn't have any, criteria.
well, that makes it kind of easy, you know. if
Well,
there's-
I mean, in a way.
Or
maybe-
hard.
Maybe,
Sure,
maybe,
sure.
Right, maybe the criteria is really what we may want to look at. What are reasonable
Sure.
criteria against which to evaluate any request? I know several years ago, we had the request regarding the,
Memorial.
yes.
Right.
That again, I don't know that we found then that our policy was clear for us.
As it sits right now, the policy is that a group or person may submit a request to the superintendent. The superintendent presents it to the board, as has been presented last February. And we determined in February, the board determined in February that they would wait. And subsequently, you've had another request in writing from, in this case, the Athletic Booster Group, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, to take some kind of an action on it.
Infrequent for exceptional individuals
Yeah.
would be the parameters I would look at. That's spelled T-O-B.
Well, I would certainly agree with that. I think it, you know, my personal feeling would be I'd want something extraordinary before we did it. I would hate to get us into naming each classroom as somebody says, gee, you know, this should be such and such a classroom. But I do think it's appropriate with people that have, you know, for someone that's really an extraordinary situation.
I think my 2 cents worth is I'm kind of an advocate for letting some time pass, because I think legacies take a little time to manifest themselves. And at some point, I think it's you got to just let time pass. And so maybe that's the reaction I'm having as much as anything. Any other reactions, generally speaking?
No, I would add, I can recall the discussion we had regarding the memorials, because you wanted to be very careful about doing those. And I agree with everything that has been said. I think, one, important, let the time pass, which in this one particular instance we have done because we tabled it from in the winter. But also, I think naming buildings is an extreme honor for that particular person. So if you have someone in your community that does, you know, that is put in that type of respect, then I would agree that it should be done. So that's my 3 cents worth.
All right, that's really is what I was hoping for, is a general discussion about this that could give some guidance to the committee as the specific issue is taken up in the committee. Any other items from the board? All right, well, we come to action items. Does anybody want to pull anything from the consent agenda? 5 proposed action items. If not, a motion to approve would be in order.
So moved.
Support.
Motion and support. Any discussion? Let me list the action items. Approval of the minutes of the June 14th, 2010 regular board meeting. I proposed technology purchases that we heard about at our last board meeting. The final 9-10 proposed budget amendment from last year's budget, and the proposed 2010-11 budget that was presented at our last board meeting. And a state aid note, also a resolution authorizing the issuance of notes, which is part of our cash flow scenario. Seeing no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Announcements. Our next meeting is July 12th. It is an organizational meeting, be held here in the boardroom. I will not be here on July 12th. I will be in the Dominican Republic with my family, so.
Good for you.
Well, thank you, Rob. Thank you for your service.
It has been a pleasure. Been an honor and a pleasure.
Right, because this would be your last.
As president. Not
You
your
have,
last
yeah,
meeting.
not your last meeting, but as the president, you have been exceptional.
I'm going to sit in that chair.
Unless you eat something bad in the Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Gamble the last time.
My pleasure.